Dividing dollars is much easier than dividing acres. Here's why.
How did you start this journey of land?
I grew up playing competitive tennis, so I'm in my teenage years, and I start playing and hanging out at this club while I'm playing with all of these business leaders. Well, it turns out many of them are commercial real estate guys, and they're driving really nice cars. They're playing tennis in the middle of the day, and they have tremendous flexibility. And I said, wow, this looks like an industry that I could really enjoy. And so one of those guys ends up hiring me at 23, that right out of college. Unusually, that was 41 years ago, and I have continued to be in the land business, specializing just in undeveloped property. And what really attracted me was the flexibility, the potential income, and most recently, or the last 15 to 20 years, really the idea of being able to help people and families solve problems. Land is a problem-solving business, and when you can come alongside a family and help them turn a piece of land that's an asset that's not producing income into something really spectacular, there's great satisfaction in that. So that's really the beginning of my journey.
Yeah, and I got in the business about 5 years ago. So I grew up here in Atlanta. I went to the University of Georgia. I actually studied marketing and journalism and spent the first 5 years post-grad working for a public relations agency. So I was living in Southern California. I was working a job that was tied to the media, tied to the news cycle, incredibly fast-paced, very, very fun, but not super sustainable. And the long-term dream had always been go work with dad. And so in 2020, the middle of COVID, I got married. I got moved back to Atlanta, and I left PR and jumped into commercial real estate. And that was about 5 years ago.
All that experience must have come super handy with the book, actually, the journalist and all that. I love the chemistry that you guys have together. I could really tell that you guys enjoy working together. So given that you guys have worked with so many landowners, right? Give me your top 2 mistakes that you see repeatedly in these families that you work with that own land, families or companies.
And I think one of the biggest ones is owners accepting offers directly from a home builder or from a buyer without properly exposing the land to the larger market. And we have a great example of that on a deal that we're working on. We're still working on it now. It's a 75-acre assemblage. The family inherited the land. The father passed away. They had received a written offer from a national home builder at $9 million. And this builder said, this is the top of the market, best you can do. We met with them. Marina connected really well with the daughters, and it was an amazing dynamic that she brought to the table. We get the listing. There's 5 heirs. We list the property at $11 million. We put together best-in-class marketing materials, and we properly expose this land to the market. Well, lo and behold, it's in one of the best school districts in Georgia. We end up with 8 offers at or above asking price. And the cool thing about this journey that we went on is we had identified one of those buyers as probably the 3rd or 4th best candidate. What we learned as we began to go through this is their corporate headquarters were out of town. They had a board meeting basically stating, we want this property to be the flagship community of our presence in Atlanta. Well, that's the kind of information that we would never be able to find out ourselves. We ultimately end up under contract with them well north of the asking price, and it totally blew us away. But the takeaway for a landowner is get a really well-qualified broker, make sure they expose it to the market, because you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And that's the thing that we have continued to see repeat itself, because you just don't know what the motivation of other buyers might be. Some of these landowners think they know exactly the market and who the best buyers are, but none of the sellers we worked with would have guessed that there was a corporate meeting saying this was going to be the flagship community in Atlanta. And so that's why a good broker will more than pay for themselves professionals, if they are professional and know what they're doing, and they really come alongside the owners to help them get what they deserve.
For more context, this father had passed away, and these 5 siblings are between 35 and 45 years old. And so had limited experience understanding this is their family's largest asset. I'm just really thankful that they didn't take the first offer, even though people were pushing them pretty hard. This is the best you're ever going to get. Just trust me, take it off market. And I'm glad they didn't.
I'm going to share one more just because it was a really unique story. This was about a 200-acre tract in the suburbs of Atlanta. The owners had never listed the property, and it turned out we were walking the piece of land with the wife of the owner. Well, because Marina was with me, she really connected with Marina. And so Marina and she are walking along. They're looking at the beautiful land. You know, she said, well, I don't think my husband will ever sign the listing. Well, lo and behold, we get this property listed for 60 days is all we could get. We knew who the buyers were. So $12 million listing. We have 2 offers at 12.5, but they were subject to full entitlement, rezoning, land disturbance permit, all the what ifs. The owner ends up deciding he didn't want to sell, and so he just decided he was going to take it off the market. Only about 5 or 6 months later do we learn that he had sold the land at $14 million, and he had sold it as is to somebody who we had presented it to. So this was actually one of the most interesting stories of Marina and my's career, because we had said, you know, we have this threshold that we hope to obtain for every land deal because they're so difficult to get. And we only learn about this transaction when we get a call from a broker who says, I understand you were involved in this property and I've got a Christmas present for you. I want to give you $5,000 to have you sign this lien waiver. And we're like, something smells a little funny here. So Marina and I huddle, and she says, Dad, I'm sure it's one of these people that we've already talked to, and, you know, we deserve our full fee. And so we end up basically changing this $5,000 on a lien waiver. We scratch it out. We write in a big number and we send it back to their attorney and say, we need you to wire this money into my account by 5 o'clock today. Believe it or not, the wire hit our account. If Marina had not pushed me to say, Dad, if we don't ask for what we're due, I would have settled for less. And so one of the great lessons there is nobody will fight for you like yourself. And the same thing with landowners. Nobody is going to fight for that landowner like themselves. And that's why they need to really understand the dynamics of the properties around them, the people involved, the politics, all of those things.
So many things that go into a land transaction, right? It's like, I'm sure you feel the same way. We love it so much because it's, you know, once you get to learn all the components, you're like a director of an orchestra, right? You need to put all that together and make it happen.
It was so interesting because it was bought by an LLC who had an LLC who had an LLC. Like, it was buried. And once I found the bottom of the layers, I was like, I knew this was wrong. And so, yeah, my conclusion was ask what we're due. Like, I have no shame in the game here. Worst case, they say no. And then we fight them or we don't fight them. It was a journey, that's for sure. One other mistake I'll add, other than not hiring a great broker, that we see landowners make so often is underestimating zoning density politics. People just don't realize how complicated it is, how involved you need to be, how one vote can change the price of your land dramatically. 2 quick stories there. One, we worked with a landowner who years prior, the DOT was widening the road that their land fronted on. In that negotiation, he fought really, really hard to get a median cut onto his property. And he was more sophisticated than most and knew at some point down the road, this will be valuable. That has played out really well in his favor now that he has this curb cut right onto his land.
Before you leave that one, because it was a divided road, you needed a full median cut, not just a curb cut right in, right out, but a full cut across the median, and he negotiated that and won. And so can most landowners if they are willing to fight and understand the process. So he did a great job.
For his property, his development will most likely be a multifamily community, a townhome community, and being able to take a left out is huge compared to the right in, right out, and you're stuck going around the median. So yeah, he got a curb cut and right at the median cut, so you can take a left out of his property, which was a huge, huge win. Flip side is a family who there was a development going on next door to them. They owned 80 plus acres. They were putting sewer in the development next door, and they did not request a sewer easement. So even though their land was downstream from the neighbor's land, they didn't have an easement. And so the time comes for them to sell their land. They don't have access to sewer. They don't have an easement, even though it's right next door. And so that all happened before we got involved. We got involved and we ended up working with a super creative home builder who figured out how to get the easement and then bored under basically this neighbor's landscaping to hit a manhole so that their home was not disturbed, their land was not disturbed, the landscaping wasn't disturbed, and he figured out how to hit that manhole from their property without messing with any of the neighbors. But it's something that they could have done very easily when the development was happening that they just didn't know to ask. So I think that's part of what stirred the idea for the book was there's so many things that landowners should be asking and should be fighting for that if you just don't know the right questions, it's unfortunate if you don't ask.
The right question and the right people, absolutely. Because some, like you just said, it's so important to get those creative, right, builders or lawyers or engineers that you work with to make these things happen.
I'm assuming the Atlanta suburbs are like most other suburbs around the United States, where there's a lot of local good old boy politics that go on. Understanding when those politics are in your favor and when you're in a position where you can create value by obtaining zoning is something that we saw firsthand. There was a developer who contracted for a 500 unit mixed use project, and those units were probably worth $30,000 per lot. So $15 million deal. The county came in and basically said, we'll give you 200 units instead of 500. So there were 300 units at $30,000 a unit. There were $9 million of value that went away like that because literally 9 months earlier, there was a very friendly county commissioner in that district who would have gladly granted the zoning and given them this value on a silver platter. And so I always tell landowners, get to know your politics, get to know the people making the decisions, and the pendulum will swing back and forth. And when it swings in favor of growth, you need to be Mr. and Mrs. Landowner in a position to take advantage of that and create value, because that was a $9 million swing because they waited too long.
That's a great segue to my next question, which is, on your book, the title is 13 Proven Strategies to be a Wise Landowner. So out of those 13 strategies, which is the most underutilized by owners today?
One of the ones we see so frequently is this idea of poor ownership structure. So there's a lot of ways to own properties, and we see a lot of families get in really complicated situations where there's not a clear path forward. So for example, we worked with one family. There were 18 different heirs of multiple generations, and they didn't get along, and there wasn't an operating agreement to say who makes the decision. Do we vote? Is it majority? How do we move forward? And so sometimes people get in these situations where it's everybody has to agree or a deal doesn't get done. And that can really, really hold up a family making a transaction when you have one member of a party who doesn't want to do the deal and they can stop the whole thing in the tracks. And unfortunately, the other members don't have a ton of other options if the structure of the ownership is that everyone has to agree or it doesn't happen, then that legally it is what it is. So we always recommend getting really, really good legal counsel regarding ownership of properties and understanding the decision-making process, who has decision-making power and what needs to be done if multiple parties disagree to try and move a deal forward. So
those operating agreements, of companies are so important. People don't pay attention to those. And sometimes they just, they think that they can just get a cookie cutter, download a form and just complete it. And then that becomes a nightmare at the time of closing. Absolutely.
Everyone goes into this with great intentions, right? Like the grandpa dies and gives all the land to all of his heirs. And everyone says, yeah, we all get along. This is going to work out. We'll just figure it out when we get there. And then 20 years later, someone's divorced and someone had children and someone else didn't have children. And what percentage does everyone get? And it just gets really messy really quickly. So, but with good legal advice and good clear structure, you can prevent that before it happens to you.
I want to give the grandfather the spirit with which he was trying to help his heirs was very honorable. But he goes to an attorney who was not an expert in real estate and in the specific field that we're talking about. And oftentimes the number of landowners who say, oh, well, I have my attorney review it. Well, your attorney is a divorce attorney, and that's not who needs to be reviewing your real estate contract. Oftentimes attorneys are a little bit like doctors. They don't like to be thought of less than an expert. And so a divorce attorney might say, well, how hard could it be? It's just selling real estate, And I encourage all of your listeners to find really expert legal advice when it comes to ownership and contracts and really even brokers. I know we made a comment about the quality of a good broker is do your research. Don't just because you like the person. I mean, you want to really know that this person is a professional, expert in their field, a trusted advisor, and those are the things that really will add the value. I want owners to understand they're part of the solution, which is finding good counsel.
If you could think, now that we're talking about all these deals that you guys have done over your career, tell us one that has been the most challenging that you have worked with, and why was it so difficult?
They're all challenging, And so we're like, just throw a dart at the map and any of them would qualify. But one in particular that was really challenging, but also very, very rewarding was a deal that was 107 acres. It was an assemblage with 4 owners. It had previously been under contract to a national home builder that couldn't figure out how to get it done. We knew who should buy it. The sellers weren't going to list it. And so we had to pick our best horse to ride. And we won them over. We got it under contract. And there were political hoops and loops that we had to jump through. We had to annex from the county into the city. We ended up being the last rezoning that got approved before basically the entire city council was voted out. We got through by the skin of our teeth, which was a huge win, but there was limited sewer capacity. We needed a lift station. We needed a traffic circle. We needed it in 2 phases. So then we needed a construction easement so we could develop on some of the property that hadn't yet been bought. I mean, it was like every step of the way was a hurdle.
How long did it take you?
2 years. But I mean, it finally sold.
That's not bad for such a complex deal. 2 years is...
We were in a lot of boxing rings trying to make our way to the finish line. But when it happened, we were so excited.
One of the challenges on that deal, so we brought in this builder who wanted to really do a higher end community, but part of that meant he wanted it to be private. He wanted to have it gated on both entrances. We got into this battle with the local Department of Transportation because they said, well, if it's gated, then we aren't allowing people to go through to connect to those 2 streets. And we said, that's correct. We don't want cars to go through. And we picture a mom in a stroller along the sidewalks wanting it to be, very controlled and all of this. And so you end up battling different requirements of, the traffic department saying, we want traffic to flow, and the home builder going, we want privacy and security. So you have to work through those different things.
And then on the flip side, tell us one of the most rewarding land deals and why?
1996, my son was 6, and in going into kindergarten, Marina was 5, or maybe he's going into first grade, she's going into kindergarten, and we're involved with this private Christian school. They asked me to be on the board, and because I think they knew I was in the land business, they said, oh, he's going to be the guy to go help us find land. And so I had said, yes, I will gladly go try to put a land deal together. And so we contact all these different owners. We figure out where it should locate. We end up contracting for the property. And literally, we're about 3 weeks from closing. This was 1996, and we're supposed to close in 97. The contract was like for $1.5 million. When I went and talked with the head of the school, he said, well, Bruce, we only have $300,000. So I'm like, oh, what have I got myself into? I said, this is going to be an opportunity for me to stretch my faith to see how this amazingly challenging hurdle was going to be overcome. And sure enough, we had somebody step up and loan the school the money right at the last minute to close it. I had done it out of the kindness of my heart because I love the mission of the school. We ended up closing the deal. Both my son and daughter graduated from this school. Our dear friends are all associated with this school. And so the idea of using your natural abilities for some higher purpose and using them to help others kind of got solidified at that point. And so although we didn't make a penny on the deal, we kind of got these eternal graces that were really wonderful for both our whole family and my son and daughter.
One of my favorites was actually the first deal I ever did. It was the very first one that I saw start to finish. It was 54 acres. It was owned by an uncle and a nephew. The uncle had been married for 62 years and his wife had recently passed away, and he needed to sell the land to be in an assisted living home. And so one of the first couple times we met him, he was showing us around his house. I mean, he's pulling out like his wedding photos from 60 years ago, and his wife was named Doris, which was my grandmother's name. So that was just kind of cool. And we worked through that whole process. It was a journey getting that deal done. It was in a municipality that did not have a PUD, planned unit development, where you could do multiple product types. And so we worked with the local government to establish a new zoning ordinance that then this project was the first of its kind to be in the city. So that was just like really cool to get to the finish line for the first time. And then another that just makes me smile is always hearing what landowners do with the money. And they can come into millions of dollars for people who may never have had much. We had one grandfather who said, I can't wait to sell this land because I am going to set aside money for each of my grandchildren to have a down payment for their first home. It's like, you don't think how far it's going to go until someone says something like that. And you're like, oh my gosh, these kids are going to grow up and their lives are going to be different because we were involved in this little moment in their family.
It is so rewarding when we get to work with families, right? Versus, I mean, we all have the builders, the developers, the big companies, but when you get to work with families like that, you know, it's life-changing for them. I was just looking at a site that I was just talking to a landowner actually yesterday, and I was looking at when did he purchase this lot. It actually doesn't, it says 1900. There's no value. He has 50 acres. So there was like a quick claim deed somewhere in there for $100. So he owns this from great grand from the past. And again, you know, I'm helping him show him what his land is worth because he has no idea. This is something that he has been holding for generations. And now, you know, he's finally said there's a PUD that was done next to him. I'm not like, this is the right time for you to look at What can you do here?
One thing we tell landowners is it's easier to divide dollars than acres. And it's such a good reminder because at the end of the day, like land is every parcel is unique, the shape is unique. So if you have a bunch of heirs, you can't just say you get these 20 acres and you get these 20 acres. Like it just doesn't work. So if you have a big parcel and a lot of heirs and you want to give it away, sometimes the best thing to do is to sell it and then you just divide the cash equally.
Absolutely.
One of the last little add-ons to that story was a gentleman who he was born in like the late 20s, early 30s, and he had that whole mindset of like save, 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 save. You know, you never want to dispose of anything. And he ended up selling a tract, and now he had this big pool of cash, and he was getting older. And I talked to him. I said, Paul, have you ever thought of just like buying your daughter a car and just doing it while you're alive, and to be able to experience the joy of giving her that while you can still experience it? Because oftentimes they have a mindset, oh, the guy's like 90 years old. I'm going to need $3 million. I'm like, I'm pretty sure you're going to be all right. But to give it away while you can still enjoy, you have to be delicate and gentle and have a good rapport with the owner. But the joy that he received by just, buying a new car for his daughter was just such a great thing to be a part of.
I know that you guys are part of CCIM. You got your designation. Marina, you have the designation or not yet?
Yes, I was pinned April of 24.
Also, that is amazing. Actually, you know what? For people that don't know what CCIM is, it's a great commercial real estate organization where you get pinned. You have to take 4 courses. You have to take some other additional education, pass exam for every module, and then take another exam. It is quite a journey. Do it. And it takes years. Oh, and on top of that, you have to put a portfolio together of X amount of millions of dollars where you show the experience, right? People underestimate. There's actually a lot of people that want to take it, but either they don't have the time for the education or the money or the experience. So kudos to both of you for being a part of the CCIM. And for younger brokers, what skills or mindset are non-negotiable for you guys for the success in land brokerage?
We always tell landowners, we're going to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly. We're always going to tell the truth. We don't want to get in the weeds and have them get all mired in the stuff that we deal with. But at the same time, you always want to be telling the truth because you want them to understand you're on their team. You are their advocate and you are their trusted advisor. So for young brokers, it's okay to say you don't know the answer, but Mrs. Jones, I'm going to go find the answer out and I will be back to you and I will let you know. That's much better than coming up with some crazy idea. So I think, always telling the truth, perform and hit your dates. Like if you say you're going to call them on Wednesday, call them on Wednesday. Also, learn to be the expert in your field. Whatever that field is that you're in, if you're land, then you need to know the zonings, you need to know the sales, you need to know who's active, what's going on politically in the area. Are they building new roads? How are the schools designated? Are the sewer plants at capacity or not? All of these things that we take for granted, but you need to communicate to your owners that you know this stuff.
One of the things I think is super important, and there's books about this, but it's the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And a fixed mindset is like, I know what I know and that's it. And growth is always saying, there's something else I could learn here. And I think that's been really fun in the dynamic between me and my dad of, I came from public relations and marketing. I knew nothing. I had never looked at a sewer line map in my life before. And suddenly there's so much to grow. And he was teaching me so much. And so even now in the business, he's been doing it for 41 years. And there's moments where he's like, I've never come across this problem before. And in some situations that can sound discouraging, but if you have a growth mindset, it's like, okay, a new problem to solve, a new way to grow. So especially for new brokers, like just go in with a growth attitude and you'll go pretty far. 2 other things. One, and both I actually learned from my very first boss post grad. She would always always say there's enough business to go around. And there is a competitive spirit that's really good that drives brokers. But also, like when we see someone else's success, I always want to be able to say, like, congratulations, I'm so happy for you, and really mean it. And there's enough. There's just enough to go around. So that's a good one where you take the hits and you feel like you're getting punched around to still be like, there is enough to go around. And the third one is enthusiasm wins. There are a lot of challenges in this business, but when we approach a problem with a level of excitement to solve it rather than discouragement, it's like the whole era of a business meeting can change, a conversation can change if we lead with enthusiasm and possibility and growth.
Which, you know what, as independent contractors, right, like we are, and we have to have that. And especially, you know, this is not a sprint, right? This is a marathon, especially in our line of work, and you definitely need that enthusiasm.
I have to give you a quick compliment, Monica, because that is something that attracted both Marina and myself to you. Is every time we would cross paths, whether it was on a Zoom or in person, there was positive energy and a can-do attitude, and it didn't matter what the problem was or what the hurdle is, that you're going to figure out the solution. And that's very attractive and a great quality.
Oh, thank you. To wrap things up, I wanted, you know, I loved your book. And you know what I love most about it? It's such an easy read. I love stories. You learn so much through stories. You know, writing a book is no small feat at all. So what was the hardest part about writing the book, and what kept you going?
I'll give you some backstory on the book, because what happened was I first started working with my dad, and he's teaching me about real estate and land and walking property. And I know nothing about any of this stuff. And I'm thinking, sheesh, I need to add some value to this company. And so let me pull out marketing things. Okay, we can redesign the website. I'm going to make us new business cards. I'm going to pull out things that I knew how to do that I could figure out how to contribute. And one of my ideas was we should write an article in the local paper. I can pitch a news editor, easy peasy, and let's get you written in the local paper. It can be an article about, 3 things landowners need to know about how to value your property. We're like, great. We start writing. Dad's like pacing the office, telling stories, saying all these ideas, and I'm typing, trying to organize everything. It's getting longer and longer. And all of a sudden I'm like, Dad, we can publish a book. So the intent was never we did not approach it saying, let's write a book. It was, let's add value to landowners. And the more I pulled out of my dad's brain, bigger it got. And then we hired an editor, we hired a book cover designer. It turned into a whole thing. But I think one of the challenges was just organizing all the ideas. When you have someone who's been in the same business, in the same geography for 41 years, they know a lot and may not realize, I don't think, Dad, you realized how much you knew. And it wasn't until I was asking, and it was like, whoa, the average Joe doesn't know any of this. We need to tell them. I think organizing it all, putting the examples together, figuring out what fit where, and then just getting to the finish line. It probably took a year for us to put the whole thing together. And it was fun. The first time we mailed a copy to ourselves and held one in our hands, and we're like, whoa.
That must have been awesome. Yes.
To collaborate with your daughter or your son, there's something that's so gratifying about working together and knowing you have each other's back and that you're going to figure these things out. And she's brought so much energy and technology and enthusiasm and organization. And, I'm just kind of an old guy, and she's just, kind of taken us to the next level. So it's a great gift to have her.
That is awesome. Well, I want to thank you both for being here with me today. And again, everybody, Top Dollar Dirt, you can buy it at Amazon.com. And also you can visit their website, right? NorthGeorgiaLand.com.